Behaviors are a window to the brain, and today we're going to go through 4 warning signs that we should be aware of in ourselves or a child that might be an indicator that we are struggling with some sort of gap or inefficiency in development. Now, taking a step back, we know the brain isn't fully developed at birth, and it grows and develops based off of the input that it receives. Now, during different stages in our development, we use different and more efficient tools to be able to socialize and engage in our world. So just to recap what you may have seen on this page before, an infant is going to primarily communicate with the world through things called primitive reflexes, a rooting reflex, a spinal galant reflex. We've had many videos on this in the past, so go look at that. After these reflexes integrate and disappear, which they should do, it gives way for a child to use a primary way of engaging with the world called movement and touch. When we put that, think gross and fine motor development. After movement and touch are fully developed or more developed, it gives way for our child to then begin the more efficient tool of auditory and verbal processing. And by around 6 years old, we should be using the most efficient tool that we have, which is visualization and cognition, and able to best and most efficiently engage in our world. So here are some warning signs that we might have a deflection in that path. Number 1, you or your child feel a sudden onset in OCD tendencies or anxiety. Now, anxiety means that the nervous system is being overwhelmed by something. It could be many different things, but oftentimes what it is an input that is greater than what our body can handle. Now, above the age of 6, the input that the world requires is everything we should do, we should be adequately able to visually process our world. Everything we look at, sitting still, we should be able to visually process things. Socialization is a visual dance because we have to be able to predict things that can happen, because nothing is 100% predictable when it comes to socialization. When we have a sudden onset in OCD tendencies, especially if they're physical tendencies, and anxiety, what it could mean is that we are resorting to some lower level tools. The demands of our world are greater than what our body can handle. So we are feeling or doing the OCD tendencies to be able to have something that we can control, because increased control means decreased predictability means decreased stress, and a child or we are trying to do what we can to be able to make less predictability in our world. Number 2, we notice ourselves or a child or a friend become increasingly sensitive to sound. This has been a huge one with the 4th of July holiday. If we're becoming increasingly sensitive to sound, it means that our nervous system is overwhelmed and we are not appropriately processing auditory and verbal input. We need to be asking why that could happen and doing specific things and able to get our child to be better able to process auditory and verbal input. Number 3, a child who really struggles to connect in a group and socialize, or specifically they are constantly seeking out peers who are younger than them, older than them, adults, or even animals. By not connecting with kids our own age, we really decrease predictability. If we connect with kids who are younger than us, well, it's really easy. We know what they're going to do. They're not going to do anything crazy. And their level of connection with the world, they might be using less complex tools than what we should be using. So it's easier for us. If we're always connecting with kids that are older than us, there's almost this level of acceptance. We're the younger kid in the group. And so because we're the younger kid in the group, we can get away with doing things that aren't developmentally appropriate because the other children understand, hey, this kid is just younger. Whereas if we were to do that same thing with a group of kids our age, it's weird, it's different. This child should be using the same tools that we are. Why is there a gap? And the last one, if you look at this, should be pretty easy. A child who is constantly blocking their visual field is trying to decrease visual input. Now, again, when we look at these different things, if we understand that there's a gap or trajectory, what we need to do is understand why that is the case. We want to ask and answer 2 major questions. Number 1 is what we just discussed, is what tools is our child using and are they developmentally appropriate? But because we know that the brain didn't and doesn't grow in a vacuum, it grows based off the input it receives, we should also look and do a specific evaluation to understand, to see if there's any sort of imbalance or interference or irritation in the information coming from the environment going up to the brain. If there is some sort of imbalance or irritation with that information from the environment up to the brain, it will cause a fight or flight response in a child's nervous system, and we can't be in both growth and defense at the same time. So for you or I, we might feel a stress or a pain or something like that when that is occurring, but in a child, what it will literally do is cause them to deflect off of the normal developmental trajectory path and cause them to be stuck in the field that they are at and stuck using tools that are inefficient. We can't be in growth and development at the same time. If we reduce or correct that imbalance, if we correct that irritation, we might just be giving the child the missing link that they need in order to be able to grow, develop, socialize, engage in their world better for the rest of their lives.